Most people are nervous in front of a camera. So pulling out a really natural and genuine expression can be really difficult when you're taking headshots. In today's video, we're gonna cover a lot of different techniques that you can use to get the most natural expression from your subject. Before we dive in, like, subscribe, and tap the bell to be notified of all future videos. Having a consultation with your client is super important. It's gonna allow you guys to get on the same page and talk about the style you're going for, what kind of backdrop, what's the wardrobe gonna be like. All of those details matter. So if your client is a real estate agent, they probably wanna shoot on a white background, mainly because they want to use that headshot and apply it on various assets. They might want to put on a business card or a billboard. Their requirements are going to be different than an actor or a yoga instructor. What color should the clothing be? What style should the clothing be? It's going to allow your client to actually prepare for that photo shoot. That way they're not going in blind. They know exactly what to expect. They've prepared, you've prepared, and it's going to be a much more pleasant shoot because of that. Help your subject pick the right clothes. So in a lot of cases, people don't know exactly what to bring. So in general, I'd recommend staying with solid neutral colors. Avoid any stripes or big logos that might be distracting from the face. Also really consider their personality and what they're going for. Every color means something. So if you're photographing a doctor or a lawyer, blue is a color that evokes knowledge and experience. So if your subject requires that, ask them to bring that with them. You don't have to go with it. Ideally, your subject should bring at least a couple outfits with them. That way your subject can try it on and see what it looks like. So they might think that they look really good in blue, but you might realize that white actually suits their skin color a little better. If you're shooting something that requires a formal outfit, like a jacket and a suit, you'll want to make sure that your subject steams their shirts before they arrive. Separate your subject from the background. And if your subject is in front of a bunch of trees or some distracting elements in the background, you'll want to pull them at least a couple feet away from that background. That way you can actually blur out the background and keep them in focus. I'd recommend going with an f4. If you go with a wider aperture than that, you could potentially blur out one of the eyes. If you're shooting in a studio space, the same exact thing applies. Pull them away from the background, maybe even add an edge light just to separate them even further from the background. If you're shooting in a studio space, I'd recommend going with an f8 or above. That way the eyes are going to be in focus, so you don't have to worry about anything falling out of focus. Give your subjects time to relax. Getting your photo taken can be such a nerve-wracking experience for a lot of people. What happens if your subject is feeling nervous? That's going to show up on camera. So if you have the time available, I'd recommend spending at least 10-15 minutes just talking with your client. It doesn't have to be such a long conversation because sometimes you're not going to have that much time, but it doesn't have to be super short either. Get to know them. Do they have any hobbies, kids, pets? Doing this is going to make your subject a lot more comfortable, and that's going to show up on camera. So again, your subject's gonna feel nervous in general getting their photo taken. Ask them to make a goofy expression. That's gonna allow you to immediately break the ice, and it's gonna help them realize that the stakes aren't that high. So everything after that first goofy photo is gonna be a lot easier. And then you can tell them to make micro adjustments to their expression, to their body, to the pose, all that stuff, once you get them to relax in front of the camera. Lighting is paramount when you're taking headshots. Again, you'll want to talk to your client about this in terms of what style they're going for, but in general, for headshots, you really want even and soft lighting on your subject's face. And doing so can be pretty simple. If you're shooting outdoors, just look for shade, kind of like where we are right now. The lighting is pretty soft on my face. Just make sure that you're facing the general direction of the sun, because even if you're in the shade, you may not get the best lighting. You really want that catch light in the eyes. So what I'll do on photo shoots is I'll stick out my hand and look for the light source. If I start noticing some shadows, then you know that's not the direction to point your subject towards. If you're shooting in a studio space, I recommend at least a 3 or 4 point lighting setup. So you'll basically have a key light for the main source, a fill light for any shadows. You'll have an edge light for your subject to separate them from the background. Also, if you want to blow out the background with another light source, if you're going for that pure white background. If you're taking actor headshots, sometimes they do require a dramatic look. You might want to include some controlled shadows on one side of the face. Doing so is going to create a more dramatic and mysterious look. So people generally feel more comfortable when they're sitting down. So what I would recommend, if you can, start off with your subject sitting down. Photograph them for about 15-20 minutes, get them comfortable, and then at some point, whenever you feel it's natural, have them stand up. When a person stands up, they're just gonna have more energy. Some photographers prefer their subject sitting, some prefer them standing up. So there's a big difference between an average headshot and a great headshot, and the difference is in the details. So once you've got the backdrop, lighting, camera settings all figured out, it's really time to get into those micro adjustments when it comes to directing. So a little head tilt can make all the difference. Bringing the right shoulder back a little bit can make all the difference. And then also I'd recommend experimenting. Try out different poses. If you're shooting digital, there's no harm in taking one extra photo or even 10 extra photos. So really it's all about paying attention to those little details because that stuff can make a huge difference. So when you're taking photographs, keep talking to your subject and keep it positive. So doing this is gonna reassure them that they're doing great and that you guys are on the right track and that the images are turning out awesome. It's gonna build up their confidence even more and you'll be able to get better expressions from your subject. So not every image is gonna be amazing, but it's really important to provide that positive reinforcement to your subject. Maybe that image isn't great, but the next one could be. So just keep it positive, keep talking to your subject. Just remember, silence is the enemy. If you're in a studio space, I'd highly recommend shooting tethered. So when you take a photo of your subject, they'll be able to see it instantly on a screen. You'll be able to immediately tell whether your lighting is good, the focus is there. It's gonna give you a larger screen to work with, which is a lot easier than looking on a little LCD screen. It's also gonna provide your subject with an instant feedback loop. You see whether their wardrobe looks good, how their expression is, how their body language is. So if there's an adjustment that has to be made, they'll know exactly what to change for the next photo. So most people are very self-conscious when they get their photo taken. So when you tell them to smile, you're gonna get a very forced and fake smile from them. So really your job as a headshot photographer is to pull out that natural and engaging expression from your subject. You have to make them forget about the camera. It's just you and them. So just do whatever it takes to build that rapport with them. So this happens during the phone call before the photo shoot. This happens when they walk through the door. This happens during the photo shoot. So the whole idea is to get them out of their head so that they can enter the flow with you. That's when you'll get the best expressions from your subjects. So how do you make your subject look flattering? So one technique that was popularized by Peter Hurley is to push out the jawline. So this technique is pretty simple. Ask your subject to push their forehead out and to keep their neck as tall as possible. At that point, you can tell them to bring their chin down a little bit. So usually what happens is that the skin tightens up here and then you'll see more of a jawline. You notice that this is their good side. Tell them to just bring their cheek out towards the camera. Again, you don't want to be so extreme with it because it's not going to look natural. But the whole idea is that it does work. It just pronounces the jawline a little bit more. So if you can make those micro adjustments when their head is out, then you'll be able to make them look flattering and pull out the best expressions. So to make your headshot look as natural as possible, I would avoid anything too extreme. For example, telling your subject to point their shoulder directly to the camera. Who actually stands like this and talks to people, you know? So it's not gonna be natural, just avoid that type of stuff. So the best headshots are usually the ones with the simplest poses. You don't have to go overboard with the poses. Generally, you don't want your subject's body to face the camera like this. Ideally, give them a little bit of a 45-degree turn. It's gonna create some depth in the photo and it's gonna allow your subject's face to be the focus. Telling them to tilt their head just a tiny bit, bringing the chin down just a little bit. It's really about those small changes that you make that's gonna pull off the most natural pose and expression. And there you go, just a handful of tips that's gonna make your headshots even better. Do you guys have any tips that we missed? Leave them in the comments below. If you want more videos like this, like, subscribe, and tap the bell to be notified of all future videos. We'll see you next time.